You sell out your own town for money. That makes you worse than a killer. When people in Dusty Creek started disappearing, folks stayed quiet. But one cowboy, Caleb Rowdy, refused to look the other way. What he uncovered would shake the entire town and expose a truth buried deep beneath the ranch. True Wild West Stories invites you to hear what really happened. The sun had only just begun to slip behind the dusty hills when the town of Dusty Creek stirred with unease. It wasn't the kind of place where things happened. Folks liked it that way. A good day meant cattle didn't stray, and the mail came on time. But that evening, something felt wrong. A small group had gathered near the center of town, right outside Granger's Mercantile. Boots shuffled over dirt. Murmurs grew louder with each minute, and more faces peeked out from behind swinging screen doors and wooden blinds. "Anyone seen Hank?" asked Merle, the postmaster, scratching the gray beneath his sweat-stained hat. "Ain't like him to leave the forge cold before supper. Heard he was headed home," another man added. "Walked right past the old grain mill, then vanished." "Vanished?" barked old Joe, who ran the barber shop. "A grown man don't just vanish unless something or someone made him." There was something dangerous in the way that word vanish hung in the air. It wasn't new to Dusty Creek. Years back there had been whispers, drifters who came through and never left, a hired hand that left her clothes behind but no footprints. Folks chalked it up to accidents or maybe someone catching a train out in the night. But the look in their eyes tonight said they remembered. Caleb Rowdy leaned against the porch post of the saloon, his hat pulled low over his brow. He'd just come down from working the open range and hadn't even cleaned the dust off his boots. He wasn't one for gossip, but he listened carefully. Behind the buzz of concerned voices, he caught Sheriff Roy Granger stepping out of the station, chewing on a toothpick like he had all the time in the world. His long tan duster flared slightly in the breeze. "What's all this now?" Roy asked, squinting against the last rays of sunlight. "Hank's gone," Merle said, moving toward him. "Didn't show for dinner. Didn't head home. His tools still sitting on the bench, like he was in the middle of working." Sheriff Granger glanced over the crowd. "Dusty Creek ain't the kind of place for drama. Maybe Hank had a few too many and wandered into the brush. I'll take a look come morning." "Come morning?" Caleb spoke up, his voice low but firm. "If he's hurt, he don't have until morning." Granger's eyes flicked to Caleb, unreadable. "We don't jump to ghosts and goblins every time someone's late. Let the man be." The sheriff's tone shut the crowd up, but not the tension. One by one, folks turned away, muttering under their breath. Caleb didn't move. He watched Roy's back as the sheriff walked away, slow and casual, like nothing in the world could rattle him. But Caleb saw it, just for a second, that flicker in his eyes. Not concern, not confusion, something else, something colder. As the sun fully dipped and lanterns flickered on around town, Caleb made his way toward Hank's forge. He didn't like feeling useless, especially not when something stank like this. The forge sat on the edge of town, near the path leading toward the abandoned Burnett Ranch. Its shutters were closed, but the door was ajar. He stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. The place was dead quiet. The fire had long since gone out. Ashes lay still in the hearth. Tools were scattered on the bench like Hank had been pulled away mid-strike. And then Caleb saw it, just near the corner of the forge, half hidden beneath soot and embers. A boot print. Fresh. Not Hank's. too narrow, too clean, like it didn't belong here. And trailing from it, like blood drawn across old canvas, was a thin line of red, not yet dried. He crouched low, brushing aside the ash. The blood wasn't from a cut thumb or a blacksmith's accident. It was too deliberate. A streak, smeared and leading, out the back door. Something in Caleb's gut turned cold. He stood slowly, eyes narrowing as a gust of wind crept through the cracks in the timber, carrying with it the faintest scent, iron, sweat, and something fouler beneath. The kind of smell that told you something had gone wrong. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. The night was already whispering enough. Night settled over the plains like a heavy wool blanket, thick with silence and the scent of dry grass. The stars above Dusty Creek blinked quietly in the blackness, distant and uncaring. Out on the edge of town, Caleb Rowdy lay stretched across a patch of rough prairie, the sky his only roof, his saddle his pillow. His horse was hobbled nearby, chewing lazily. A small herd of cattle grazed behind the fencing, their occasional snorts and hooves pressing into the dry dirt, the only sounds aside from the constant hum of crickets. Caleb had bedded down for the night, his hat tipped low over his eyes, one hand resting lightly on the butt of his revolver. He hadn't stopped thinking about the blacksmith, Hank, and the blood smear in the forge. That mark hadn't been right. It wasn't the sort of mess a man left behind on his own. He was drifting in and out of a light sleep when something broke the dark. A flicker, then another. He sat up, slowly. Just past the ridge, above the line of cottonwoods that split the land like a spine, he saw it. A faint, twitching light. Orange, like fire. It wasn't natural. Not out here. Not this late. God damn it, Caleb muttered under his breath, pulling his hat down tighter. What now? He stood, brushing dust from his pants, and stared across the open land. That light, it was coming from the direction of Burnett Ranch. The place had been empty for years. Nobody had lived there since the fire. Some said the Burnetts left in the dead of night, after their youngest disappeared. Others whispered of something worse, of the land being cursed, voices in the walls, livestock turning up gutted without a trace of blood. Kids dared each other to sneak onto the property, but no one ever lasted long. Even drunk cowhands gave it a wide berth. Caleb wasn't a man who believed in ghosts, but he'd seen the look on Roy Granger's face earlier. That flicker of something hiding behind the sheriff's measured calm. And now this light, this strange, stuttering light from a place no one should be. He checked his rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and started walking. The dry grass rustled under his boots as he made his way past the herd. The cattle didn't spook, but a few lifted their heads, ears twitching. Caleb gave them a long look. Animals always sensed trouble before a man did. The light blinked again, closer now, less like a campfire, more like a lantern moving behind old boards. He reached the old fence line, much of it collapsed and brittle with age. He ducked through and moved into the thicker scrubland that ran between the ranch and the edge of town. As he crested a low hill, the full view of Burnett Ranch opened up before him. It looked worse than he remembered. The main house stood slouched like an old drunk, its roof caved in on one side. The barn, however, still stood, barely. The moonlight gave the place a skeletal quality, casting long, thin shadows that stretched unnaturally across the dry earth. And there, glowing dimly from inside the barn, was the light. It flickered behind warped wooden slats, like someone pacing with a lantern. Caleb crouched low, moving between patches of brush. His heartbeat slowed, steady, like it always did when things felt wrong. There was no wind, no sound, save for the rustle of his boots and the distant rasp of a cricket. He crept up to the side of the barn. The boards were weather-beaten, some splintered enough to see through. He pressed an eye to a narrow gap. Inside, the light wobbled gently, a single oil lamp resting on a crate. The shadows danced around it. He could make out tools, old farming equipment, a length of rusted chain. Something heavy moved in the shadows, too quick to see clearly. Then, a sharp clang, the sound of metal, chain on chain. He froze. Another sound followed, a low guttural grunt, muffled, not from an animal, human. His fingers curled tighter around his rifle. He leaned in closer. A dark shape crossed the lamplight, broad shoulders and thick arms dragging something behind it. Then, without warning, the barn door creaked, moving just enough to show a sliver of the inside. Caleb ducked, holding his breath. A moment passed. Nothing. Then another. He crept toward the door, one boot at a time, his breath fogged in the cool night. As he reached for the handle, the light inside shifted. A clang, then a voice, low, pained, and barely audible. It wasn't words, just sound, a rattle of chain. Caleb swallowed hard. The wind picked up just then, and the door creaked again, opening a fraction more. Inside, the chain swung gently, casting shadows on the far wall. Caleb took one more step, foot crunching on a dry twig. Suddenly, a massive silhouette moved past the doorway, heavy boots thudding. He dove to the side, heart slamming against his ribs. Whoever or whatever was inside had heard him. From within the barn came the groan of rusted metal and the unmistakable sound of a heavy lock snapping shut. From behind the warped wooden wall, Caleb heard it again, the unmistakable rattle of chains, and the sound of someone breathing, ragged and restrained. Caleb pressed his face to the warped, splintered gap between the barn's boards, steadying his breath. The wood smelled of rot and smoke, with a faint trace of something else, iron and mildew and fear. The old Burnett barn creaked faintly in the breeze, groaning like it remembered the fire that had gutted the main house all those years ago. He remembered hearing the stories as a boy, how the blaze came without warning, how the Burnetts vanished before dawn. No funerals, no goodbyes. Just rumors, whispered low across bar counters and fence posts. And now here he was, staring through the bones of that barn. And what he saw turned his gut inside out. A figure, slumped against a beam half covered in shadow, was a man, or at least what looked like one. Arms bound behind his back, legs twisted beneath him, a dirty cloth stuffed into his mouth. Dried blood streaked his shirt. His face was drawn tight, gaunt, eyes wide with terror. Their gazes met for a heartbeat. Caleb saw the silent plea in those eyes, raw and aching. Then the man jerked suddenly, reacting to something unseen behind him. A sound followed, a soft clink, then a low groan. Chains. Caleb held his breath and shifted slightly, trying to see deeper inside. The lantern sat crooked on a crate, casting flickering shadows over the walls. Another figure moved in the back, large and slow. Heavy boots stomped across the hay-strewn floor, dragging something metal. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. The chained man whimpered, muffled, as the bigger one came closer, looming above him like a storm cloud. Caleb could just make out the curve of a shoulder, thick arms, something glinting in one hand, a length of iron, or maybe a crowbar. He didn't wait to see what happened next. Caleb stepped back silently, hand reaching for the revolver holstered under his coat. He'd only taken half a breath when a hand clamped down on his shoulder. It was like being struck by lightning. The grip was crushing, fingers like iron bands. He spun, wrenching himself free, elbow flying backward. The shape behind him grunted as Caleb's elbow struck bone. Without thinking, he turned and shoved hard, his boot connecting with the barn's half-rotted door. The wood splintered with a loud crack, swinging wide and slamming against the wall. He stumbled inside, gun drawn, eyes scanning. The bound man moaned again, louder now. The large figure that had hovered near him turned fast. He was masked. Something pulled over his face like an old sack with holes cut out. His chest heaved under a grimy jacket, and in his hand was a length of chain, one end wrapped around his wrist. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Let him go!" The man didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, slow, testing. Behind him the captive thrashed, struggling against his bonds. Caleb raised his revolver. A shot rang out. But it wasn't from his gun. A crack, loud and sharp, echoed through the barn. Wood exploded behind Caleb's head, a shard grazing his cheek. He dropped to the ground, rolled behind an overturned barrel, just as another shot slammed into the post beside him. Someone else was outside, another gunman. "Damn it!" Caleb growled through his teeth. He risked a glance and saw the masked man retreating, dragging the captive deeper into the barn, behind a row of crates. Caleb aimed and fired once. Miss. Dust kicked up. The masked figure vanished. Outside, heavy boots pounded against gravel. Reinforcements? He had no time to guess. Another bullet tore through the barn wall, this one even closer. He crawled low, feeling splinters bite into his palms, until he reached the side door. He kicked it open and slipped into the shadows, chest heaving. His cheek stung where the splinter had cut him. His heart hammered like it was trying to break free from his ribs, and still, inside his head, burned the image of that man's face. Pale, desperate, trapped. Caleb ducked behind the barn's rear corner, panting, heart racing, as another shot rang out, this time grazing the dirt just inches from his boot. Whoever was watching the place wasn't done yet. Branches tore at his coat as Caleb sprinted through the thick forest, each breath burning like fire in his chest. The moonlight barely filtered through the dense canopy of pines, casting fractured beams across the uneven ground. His boots thundered over roots and broken twigs, every step a gamble between speed and survival. Behind him, the night roared to life. "Son of a bitch!" a voice bellowed, rough as gravel soaked in whiskey. Caleb knew that voice. Earl Dog Mathers, one of Roy Granger's dogs, and not just by name. Dog had a reputation for doing the town's dirty work when things needed to go quiet. No one ever saw him coming until it was too late, and now he was on Caleb's heels, hell-bent and howling like a madman. "You think you can sneak round our business, pretty boy?" Dog's voice echoed through the trees. "Come on, show me that hero spine of yours." Caleb didn't answer. He kept running, heart thundering louder than the gunshots that cracked behind him. Pop, pop. 2 rounds whizzed past him, one striking a tree so close that bark exploded against his neck. He ducked, weaving through a patch of underbrush, then cut right, aiming for the dry creek bed he knew would lead toward the main road. He hadn't run like this since he was a boy, since his father used to make him sprint up hills with a rifle strapped to his back. "You ain't gonna have time to aim when someone's shooting at you, Caleb," his old man had said, squinting into the sun. "You learn to run, breathe, and shoot all at once, or you ain't gonna last long out here." Back then, Caleb thought it was just another one of his father's harsh lessons. Tonight it was the only thing keeping him alive. He slid behind a wide tree trunk, panting. His hands were slick with sweat, his palms raw from scrambling across the forest floor. Another shot rang out. Crack! The bullet punched into the tree behind him, barely a foot off target. "Keep running!" Dog barked. "You're only making it fun for me." Caleb gritted his teeth, spun out from behind the tree, and fired 2 quick shots into the darkness. Bang, bang! He didn't hear a scream, but the sudden silence suggested Dog had ducked. Caleb didn't wait. He took off again, crashing through brush and leaping a fallen log. Branches whipped across his face, one slicing open the skin near his cheekbone. Blood mixed with sweat, but he didn't slow down. Through the thinning trees, he spotted it, moonlight reflecting off the dusty trail just beyond the last line of pines. The road. Safety. Almost there. Then, crack! A searing pain sliced across his left shoulder. He stumbled, nearly face-planting, but caught himself on a branch. He hissed, clutching the wound. Not deep, but it burned like hell. He pushed forward, staggering now, barely able to breathe. Dog's laughter trailed behind him, closer than ever. "Ain't no use runnin' when you're bleedin', boy." Caleb didn't respond. He had no breath left for words. He burst out of the trees onto the main road. Gravel skidded under his boots as he half ran, half fell down the incline toward the edge of town. Lights glimmered ahead, dusty yellow lanterns in the windows of the Silver Horseshoe Saloon. Thank God, he was close, but his body was quitting on him. Each step felt like dragging a sack of rocks. His legs turned to rubber. The pain in his shoulder pulsed with every heartbeat. He stumbled across the road, past the watering trough, nearly collapsing as he reached the saloon steps. Just a few more feet. He made it to the porch, grabbed the wooden railing with his good arm, and crumpled. The door burst open. A woman's voice cried out, sharp and familiar. "Caleb?" Boots clattered across the porch. Soft hands grabbed his face, his collar. Marlene. Her voice was trembling, but her grip was firm. "Damn it, what happened?" Caleb tried to speak. His mouth moved, but nothing came out except a dry rasp. Then everything faded to black. Just before he passed out, Caleb caught one last glimpse, the flicker of a shadow across the road. Dog hadn't stopped chasing. He was still out there. Marlene Harlow yanked the saloon door open with both hands and nearly tripped over Caleb's body slumped on the porch. "Jesus, Caleb," she gasped, dropping to her knees beside him. His shirt was soaked in blood at the shoulder, his face pale and slick with sweat. He groaned faintly as she lifted his head into her lap. His lips moved, but no words came. "Hang on," she whispered, brushing the dirt from his face. "You're not dying on me, Cowboy." She looped one of his arms around her shoulder and, with surprising strength, dragged him inside the Silver Horseshoe. The room was mostly empty, just a drunk passed out in the corner and the old upright piano collecting dust. The saloon smelled like tobacco and aged wood, with a hint of gun oil and whiskey. Marlene laid Caleb down on one of the leather booths near the back and rushed behind the bar. She grabbed a clean rag, a bottle of rye, and a dull paring knife. When she returned, he was conscious, barely. His eyes opened just enough to register her face. "You always this gentle?" he mumbled, wincing. "You shut up and bleed quietly," she snapped, though her voice was softer than her words. She poured the rye onto the rag, then dabbed it against the raw slice across his shoulder. He cursed under his breath, eyes tightening. "I don't know what the hell you were doing out there," she said, "but you're lucky you made it back in one piece." Caleb said nothing. He glanced around the saloon, his senses slowly sharpening. The warmth, the faint piano smell, it grounded him. But only for a moment. The creak of boots on the front porch made both their heads turn. Then the door swung open. Sheriff Roy Granger stepped inside, dusting off his hat. He looked around slowly, like a man who already knew everything and was just waiting to confirm it. "Well now," he said, his voice dry as sandpaper. "Didn't expect to find the town hero licking his wounds in here." Marlene straightened, her hands clenched tight around the rag. Caleb didn't move. Roy's boots echoed as he crossed the wooden floor. He stopped a few feet from the booth, his eyes landing on Caleb's bandaged shoulder. "Got yourself into a bit of trouble, huh?" Caleb sat up a little straighter. "You could say that." Roy raised an eyebrow. "Someone take a shot at you?" "Just a misunderstanding," Caleb said, his voice steady. "Wrong place, wrong time." Roy smirked. "That's so." The room was thick with tension. Marlene stood frozen, her eyes bouncing between the two men. The sheriff took a step closer. His hand hovered just above the grip of his holstered Colt. "Look, son," Roy said, voice low. "Let me give you some advice. There are parts of this town that run smooth because folks don't go poking around where they shouldn't. That's how things stay quiet." Caleb didn't blink. Quiet's not the same as safe. Roy's expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. "You keep sniffing around like a damn hound dog, you're gonna end up buried in the woods, same as the others who thought they knew better." Marlene gasped softly. Caleb's fingers slid closer to his own holster under the table. "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" Roy's hand dropped casually to rest on his pistol grip. "That's a warning. And trust me, boy, you don't want it turning into anything else." They stared at each other for a long beat. No words, just the quiet hum of a ceiling fan and the slow tick of a clock behind the bar. Then Roy turned on his heel. "Get some rest," he said over his shoulder. "Wouldn't want you too tired when the buzzards come." The door slammed behind him, the echo rattling the bottles behind the bar. Silence fell. Caleb exhaled slowly, sinking back into the booth. Marlene sat down across from him, hands trembling. "What the hell's going on, Caleb?" He looked her dead in the eye, jaw clenched. "I don't know everything yet. But I know this. He's hiding something, and I'm not letting it slide." Outside, the streets of dust. The saloon had long since gone still for the night. Downstairs, the bar sat empty. Upstairs, in Marlene's quarters, a single oil lamp flickered gently on a bedside table, casting warm, trembling light across the walls. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, freshly bandaged and stripped down to his undershirt. The shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, but the stiffness in his arm remained. He held a chipped mug of warm whiskey between both hands, letting the heat seep into his fingers. Across from him, Marlene leaned against the window, arms wrapped around herself like a coat she didn't have. They hadn't spoken in minutes. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. You got something on your chest, you might as well say it. She didn't look at him at first. Instead, she stared out the window at the empty street below. My father, she began, her voice tight. He used to watch the Burnett Ranch from our rooftop when I was a kid. Said he could see people going in and out at night, long after it was supposed to be abandoned. Caleb straightened slightly. After the fire? She nodded. It wasn't just rumors, Caleb. He saw things, men with covered wagons, boxes being moved at midnight. Sometimes, he said he saw chains. Chains. The word made Caleb's stomach turn. He thought of the man he'd seen bound in that barn, gagged and trembling. It lined up too well. I never saw it myself, she said, finally turning to face him. But I believed him. He started writing things down, dates, descriptions, names when he could catch 'em. Said he'd take it to the sheriff. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Roy? Marlene laughed bitterly. Yeah, Roy. My father told him everything. What happened? She walked toward him slowly, voice lowering. That night, Roy told him to keep quiet. Said Dusty Creek doesn't need ghosts stirred up, and if he kept poking around, he might end up disappearing. Caleb's jaw clenched. You never told anyone? I was a teenager, she said, her voice cracking. I begged him not to go back, begged him to burn the damn notebook, but he didn't. He said if something happened to him, the truth needed to get out. Caleb stared into his whiskey. Let me guess. He vanished? She nodded. 3 days later, said he was going to ride out toward the ridge. Never came back. There was a silence between them now, heavy as the night. Marlene stepped closer, placing her hand over his. Her touch was cold, but sure. I thought I could live with it, convince myself he laughed, that maybe he just couldn't take the threats. But deep down, her voice dropped. I always knew he was gone. Not missing. Gone. Caleb turned his palm upward, gripping her hand. We'll find out what happened to him. To Hank. To that poor bastard in the barn. I swear it. She looked at him, eyes glossy with emotion. You're the only one who's ever believed me. He managed a faint smile. Well, I've seen enough now to believe a whole lot more. Their hands lingered, neither of them pulled away. For a second, the horrors outside the saloon melted into silence. The warmth between them softened the hard lines in both their faces, the bruises, the cuts, the worry. Beneath it all was a growing connection, raw and quiet. Caleb broke the moment gently. We'll need to go back. Tonight, if possible, before they move the rest of those people. Marlene nodded. I'll go with you. Too dangerous. You'll need me to find the back way in, she replied. My father used to show me the old trails. I know where the barn lets out behind the paddocks. Caleb gave her a long look. She was serious. All right, he said, but we go careful. They stood, and Marlene moved to the dresser to grab a small satchel. As she packed, Caleb glanced out the window, habit more than anything. That's when he saw it. A figure, still, unmoving. Across the street, near the alley between the general store and the tailor's, just standing there, watching. The light from a nearby lamp post barely illuminated the brim of a hat, a long coat hanging from the shoulders, and something in the hand. Metal, maybe a pipe or a blade. Marlene, he said, voice low, closed the lamp. She turned confused. What is it? Just do it. She snuffed the flame. The room dropped into near darkness. Together they crept back toward the window. But the figure was gone, just like that. Caleb pressed his palm to the window pane, eyes narrowed. "We're not alone," he whispered. "They're watching us now." The forest held its breath. Caleb crouched low behind a thicket of scrub pine, his body tense, his hand steady on the revolver resting against his thigh. Beside him, Marlene knelt silently, eyes locked on the clearing ahead. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the whisper of leaves and the distant cry of a whippoorwill.
Then came the rumble, low at first, like thunder rolling underground. Then louder, the crunch of wooden wheels over dry brush and gravel. Caleb leaned forward slightly, peering through the branches. A narrow dirt trail wound from the east side of the Burnett Ranch, nearly overgrown, barely wide enough for a wagon. But that's exactly what appeared. A weathered, mule-drawn wagon emerged from the shadows, its sides built high with rough-hewn planks. Lanterns swung from the corners, casting sickly yellow light across the ruts in the road. It stopped abruptly just 20 paces from their hiding spot. 2 men jumped down from the front. Caleb recognized neither of them, but he took in every detail: their height, the way they walked, the hunched one's limp, the bandana tied around the taller man's neck, his broken front tooth flashing under the lantern light. They moved fast and with purpose, heading to the back of the wagon. A heavy thud echoed as the tailgate dropped. Then came the first sack. It was massive, canvas stretched tight, tied at both ends. It sagged oddly in the middle, like whatever was inside wasn't just cargo. The taller man grunted as he slung it over his shoulder. His boots sank slightly into the dirt from the weight. Caleb's blood went cold. The second sack followed, thinner but equally long. The limpness of it, the way it bounced and flopped with each step, sent chills crawling up his spine. "They're moving people," he whispered, voice nearly soundless. Marlene didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. They watched as the 2 men carried the sacks toward a hidden entrance behind the barn, an old root cellar built into the hillside. One of them pulled a key from around his neck and unlocked the heavy door. It groaned open on rusted hinges. That's when the first sack slipped. It dropped from the tall man's shoulder, landing with a wet smack on the dirt. The bag rolled once, and an arm fell out. Pale, human. A woman's hand. Fingers curled like they'd tried to hold on to something, someone, until the very end. Marlene gasped. It was barely audible, just a sharp inhale followed by a choked sound. But it was enough. One of the men stopped. He straightened slowly, his head turning toward the trees. His eyes scanned the darkness like a bloodhound catching scent. Caleb's heart jumped into his throat. "Stay still," he mouthed to Marlene, not daring to move. The man took a few slow steps forward, squinting into the black. He was maybe 15 feet away now. Caleb could see the bulge of a pistol beneath his coat. He held his breath. A moment later, the shorter man yelled from the root cellar, "Quit stallin'! We ain't got all night!" The tall one turned his head slightly. "Thought I heard something." "Just your guilty conscience," the other man growled. Still, he hesitated a moment longer, eyes boring into the trees. Caleb felt like the man was staring directly at them. Then he shrugged and turned away, walking back toward the wagon. Caleb let out a shaky breath, careful not to make a sound. The 2 men finished their grim task quickly, returning to the wagon, now lighter. They covered the back with a tarp, hopped into the driver's seat, and turned the mules around. The wagon rolled away slowly, its wheels carving deep ruts into the earth. Silence settled again, but it was heavier now, denser,
like the forest itself mourned what it had just witnessed. Caleb looked at Marlene. Her face was pale as ash, tears clinging to her lower lashes. "They're trafficking folks," he said flatly. "No more guessing." She nodded, barely able to speak. "That hand, she was still warm." He swallowed hard. "We need proof. Enough to burn them all to the damn ground." She nodded again, fiercer this time. "Then we go back tomorrow. We photograph the root cellar, the locks, the wagon, if it's there. And we find who else is in that barn." Before Caleb could answer, he felt it. A presence. He looked up slowly, just past Marlene's shoulder. In the darkness, barely lit by the fading lantern glow, stood a silhouette. Slim, tall, unmoving. A man, maybe. Or something else. Watching. Caleb reached instinctively for his gun, but the figure vanished before his hand touched the grip, gone like smoke in the wind. The sky was just beginning to pale when Caleb and Marlene crept through the outer fence of the Burnett property. A low fog hugged the ground, swirling around their boots like a warning come to life. The world was hushed, no birds, no wind, not even the chirp of insects. Just the crunch of dried leaves beneath their feet and the pounding of Caleb's heart. They moved quickly and low, ducking behind hay bales and rusted farm tools as they made their way back to the hidden cellar door. Marlene pointed to a small copse of bushes. "Behind there," she whispered. "That's where the entrance is." Caleb nodded and pulled a short crowbar from his belt. He'd oiled it that morning, silent as breath. The cellar door was just as they'd seen it, old, heavy, sunken into the slope behind the barn. The iron lock was thick but not complicated. With careful hands, Caleb worked at the latch, teeth clenched against the grinding sound of metal on metal. Click. The door creaked open just an inch, releasing a foul draft of rot, rust, and damp earth. Caleb lit the oil lantern he'd packed and held it forward. The flame flickered, casting long shadows down a narrow stairwell carved into packed dirt and old timbers. Marlene swallowed hard but stepped in beside him. They descended slowly. The walls closed in tighter with each step, the air thickening with mildew and something darker, iron sweet and unmistakable. Blood. At the base of the stairs, the ground sloped into a cramped tunnel. The floor was stone, slick and darkened in patches. Caleb knelt down, running a finger over a stain. Still wet. They moved forward, the light bouncing across wooden support beams and rusted hooks hammered into the wall. Chains hung from some of them, swaying gently as if disturbed by something more than just their presence. Then they heard it, the faint clink, followed by a muffled whimper. Marlene froze. Caleb raised the lantern. Ahead, in a low alcove behind a makeshift barrier of stacked crates and hay, lay a group of people. 4, maybe 5. Huddled together, bound at the wrists and ankles, their mouths gagged. Eyes wide with terror. One of them, a woman, looked directly at them and tried to cry out. "Oh God," Marlene gasped, running forward. Caleb knelt beside the first prisoner, a teenage boy who couldn't have been more than 17. He was pale, bruised, and thin as a rail. "We're here to help," Caleb whispered, slicing at the ropes with his hunting knife. "You're safe now. Can you move?" The boy nodded weakly. Marlene moved to the others, untying, checking for wounds. "They're starved," she said, "dehydrated, but alive." From deeper in the tunnel came a groan, a low, pained noise that didn't sound entirely human. Caleb stood, raising the lantern again. The blood trail continued past the prisoners,
toward a heavy wooden door set into the rock wall. He stepped closer. Bam! The cellar door slammed shut above them, the sound like a gunshot in the confined space. Marlene screamed. Caleb spun toward the stairs. "Get back!" he barked, shoving her behind a stack of crates. His hand flew to his revolver. Footsteps echoed from above, slow, deliberate. Then a voice, low, gravelly, familiar. "Well, well," Sheriff Roy Granger drawled, his voice oozing like tar down the stairwell. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Caleb aimed at the ceiling. "Roy, you son of a bitch," the sheriff chuckled darkly. "Told you, curiosity's a disease, and down here, folks tend to stay sick."
Caleb's hands trembled with rage. Marlene looked at him, panic rising in her chest. "We're trapped." "No," Caleb growled, eyes darting around the cramped space. "Not yet." Above, the sheriff's boots scraped against the cellar hatch. "We'll be seeing each other real soon," Roy said, voice fading. "Real soon." Clunk. The sound of the lock sliding back into place. Silence again, except now it wasn't empty. It was full of fear. Marlene sank to the ground, trembling. The freed captives huddled behind her, confused and terrified. Caleb holstered his weapon and knelt beside them. "We're getting out," he said firmly, "no matter what it takes." His lantern light flickered once more and then revealed something new on the far wall. Scratches, dozens of them, deep and desperate, as if fingernails had tried to carve their way out. Beneath them, in smudged black ink, 4 words were scrawled on the stone. Roy was always watching. Caleb stared at the message, then back toward the door. "He's been running this whole damn thing," he muttered. "And now he knows we know." The darkness was thick, not just an absence of light, but something denser, heavier. It pressed in on Caleb's chest like a weight, turning each breath into a labor. The last flicker of their lantern had sputtered out minutes ago, the flame choking to death in the damp air. Now, they were buried in it, alive. Above them, Sheriff Roy's laughter echoed down the tunnel. It was slow, deliberate, soaked in malice. "I warned you, boy," his voice boomed. "Curiosity's a dangerous thing. You had to go poking your nose where it don't belong." Caleb didn't respond. He was too busy slamming his shoulder against the thick wooden door. Again and again, the iron hinges groaning with each impact. Bam! God damn it! Bam! "Open it, you bastard!" But the door didn't budge. Behind it, the clink of a heavy lock sliding into place rang out like a sentence being handed down. Then, silence. Roy was gone. The cellar had become a tomb. Marlene's voice broke through the dark. "Caleb?" Her tone was tight, on the edge of panic. "I'm here," he answered, breathless. He turned and stumbled back toward the others, guided only by memory. One of the rescued captives whimpered, a girl, maybe 20. "What's happening? Where are we?" "You're safe," Marlene said quickly, kneeling beside her. "Just stay calm. We're going to find a way out." "I can't breathe," another voice rasped. A man. "Feels like the walls are closing in." Caleb dropped to one knee and felt around on the ground for the lantern. It was cold in his hands, the metal slick with condensation. He fumbled with the flint, trying to spark a flame. Nothing. The wick was soaked. "Shit," he muttered. The others were starting to murmur now. Panic builds fast in the dark, faster than fire, faster than bullets. He could hear the ragged edge creeping into their voices. A sob here, a plea there. Marlene moved through them like a balm, whispering, touching shoulders, assuring them over and over, "You're not alone. We're in this together." But even she was shaking. Caleb returned to the door, this time grabbing a rusted chain bolted into the wall for leverage. He pulled with all he had, muscles straining, shoulder aching from the gunshot wound that hadn't fully healed. Nothing. Just the groan of iron laughing at his effort. The scent down there was worsening, earthy rot mixed with the metallic sting of old blood. The ground beneath their boots was damp, slick. That's when he heard it. Drip, drip. He froze. Marlene must have heard it too, because her voice cut through the dark again. "Do you hear water?" Caleb dropped low, palm brushing the floor. It was wet. Not just damp, wet. He brought his fingers to his nose. It wasn't just water. "Cold as ice," he muttered. The dripping grew louder. Not rhythmic, sporadic, heavy. He shuffled back toward Marlene and the others, crouching near what felt like a dip in the stone floor. "There's a pool forming," he said. "Might be a drain somewhere, an exit." "Or it's flooding," Marlene replied, her voice brittle. A child among the captives whimpered. "Are we gonna drown?" "No," Caleb said quickly. "No one's drowning." But he wasn't so sure. The temperature was dropping, the walls sweated moisture, and somewhere deep beneath them something groaned. Not metal, not human. Earth shifting maybe, or a tunnel expanding with the weight of groundwater. Marlene sat beside him. "He planned this." "Yeah," Caleb whispered. "He's not just hiding this. He's running it." The captives were huddling now, whispering prayers, some weeping. Caleb had seen men trapped before, cave-ins, mine collapses. But this was worse, because Roy chose this, left them down here like animals. The darkness was absolute now. No shapes, no outlines, just breath and sweat and dread. Then, another sound. Clink. Metal scraping. Caleb shot to his feet. "Everyone quiet." They all froze. He listened. The sound wasn't coming from the door. It was deeper, beneath them, like metal chains dragging across stone. "What the hell is that?" Marlene whispered. "I don't know," Caleb replied. "But we're not alone down here." The group shrank together, bodies pressing close. Then, from somewhere in the dark, a splash. Caleb turned, fists clenched, heart hammering. His boots shifted in the growing puddle, and something icy brushed against his ankle. Not water, something solid. In the suffocating dark, Caleb's hands trembled, not from fear, but from resolve boiling to a head. Every breath he took was thick with sweat, rot, and the iron tang of despair. The others huddled behind him, silent now, exhausted. Some had begun to accept death. But Caleb hadn't. He stared at the cellar door. Somewhere beyond it was air, light, sky, and guns. He reached down and checked the revolver tucked into his waistband. Only 2 bullets left. He hesitated, thumb running across the worn grip. Then he remembered his father's voice. "In the dark, boy, the flash of a gun's the only truth you'll ever need. Aim it well." He raised the pistol. Marlene's voice cracked in the silence. "What are you doing?" "Making a door." He braced his back against the opposite wall, took a breath, aimed high toward the rusted top hinge, and fired. Boom! The explosion shattered the quiet like a hammer through glass. Muzzle flash lit the entire chamber for a fraction of a second, searing every detail into memory. The pale, terrified faces, the rust-streaked ceiling,
the wet glint of the spreading puddle on the floor. Smoke filled the space instantly, acrid and choking. Caleb coughed, shook his head clear, and stumbled forward. He kicked at the hinge. Still holding. One more, he growled. He aimed lower. Second hinge. Boom! This time the wood splintered. The top of the door sagged inward. Caleb hurled his shoulder into it, again and again. On the third try, the whole thing gave. The door crashed forward onto the steps with a thunderous thud, slamming stone and echoing like a gunfight across the woods. Fresh air poured into the tunnel. The prisoners didn't wait for instruction. They scrambled forward, gasping, crawling, climbing over one another in a desperate surge toward the open sky. "Go!" Caleb shouted. "Run!" Marlene pulled two women to their feet and shoved them ahead. Caleb grabbed the teenage boy and pushed him up the stairs. One by one, they burst into the night. Cool moonlight bathed their faces. The forest canopy above swayed gently, oblivious to the horror below. Caleb was the last to emerge, lungs burning, ears ringing. He collapsed to one knee, chest heaving. Marlene touched his shoulder. "You did it." He nodded but didn't answer. Then, shouts from the north tree line. "Hey!" a gruff voice barked. "There!" Flashlights flared in the darkness, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots crunching brush. 5, 6 shapes emerging fast. "Move!" Caleb roared, dragging the boy to his feet. The captives, barely able to stand, staggered into the trees. Marlene helped a limping woman hobble forward. Caleb looked back. Too late. Gunfire erupted. Crack, crack, crack! Bullets ripped through branches. Dirt exploded near their feet. One shot screamed past Caleb's ear, close enough to feel the heat. Then, a scream. The teenage boy stumbled forward and collapsed, face first in the grass. Blood darkened the back of his shirt. "No!" Caleb dropped beside him. "No, no, come on, kid, stay with me." The boy twitched once, eyes wide, breath rattling in his chest. Then stillness. Marlene yanked Caleb's arm. "We have to go." He didn't want to leave the boy, not like this. But more shots rang out, closer now. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed the revolver and ran, pulling Marlene with him. Behind them, the night screamed with gunfire and fury. As they disappeared into the forest, Caleb looked back one last time, just in time to see a silhouette stand over the fallen boy, then fire one last, cold shot into his back. The first gunshot cracked through the night like lightning tearing open the sky. Dirt exploded at Caleb's feet, and he dove behind a rusted plow near the edge of the abandoned Burnett's ranch yard. The air was thick with dust, smoke, and the stench of gunpowder. Somewhere in the chaos, someone screamed. "Keep moving!" Caleb shouted over his shoulder. Marlene was hauling one of the wounded captives toward a collapsed wagon near the barn, dragging his half-conscious body by the armpits. She didn't look back. Bullets slammed into the earth around them. The pale moonlight filtered through the trees, casting twisted shadows over the broken fences and sagging structures of the ranch. Caleb rose, fired 2 shots, then ducked again. He didn't know if they hit anything. It didn't matter. He needed to buy time. From across the yard, a guttural voice rang out like a curse carved in gravel. "Caleb!" Dog Mathers. The bastard silhouette loomed in the smoky moonlight. Broad shoulders, bald head shining with sweat, a blood-crusted knife glinting in his right hand. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't need one. Dog Mathers preferred the kill up close. Caleb took cover again. He could hear the man's boots crunching across broken glass and bone-dry earth. A memory flashed.
Mr. Dalton, the town blacksmith, his quiet smile, the way he used to fix Caleb's spurs for free. His shop empty now, his anvil cold. You fight for the ones who can't, Caleb reminded himself. He rose just as Dog reached the edge of the wagon. Caleb squeezed the trigger. Click. Empty, empty. Shit. Dog charged. Caleb barely sidestepped as the knife slashed through air where his chest had been. They collided in the dirt, a tangle of fists and fury. The revolver flew from Caleb's hand and clattered into the shadows. Dog was fast for a man his size, fueled by madness and hate. He slammed Caleb to the ground and swung the blade down. Caleb caught his wrist. They strained in the dirt, grunting, snarling like animals. You should have stayed out of this, Dog spat, his breath foul. This ain't your damn war. Caleb's fingers clawed through the grass and found something, cold, solid, a broken horseshoe. He swung it up hard, cracking it across Dog's temple. The big man reeled, blood streaming down his face. Caleb rolled on top of him, driving his knee into Dog's ribs. The knife came up again, and Caleb, with a guttural roar, grabbed the wrist, twisted hard, and plunged the blade back down into Dog's own stomach. The man's eyes went wide. He let out a howl that split the sky. Blood soaked his shirt. His grip faltered. Caleb shoved him off and staggered to his feet. Marlene was screaming something, but he couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. Dog Mathers writhed on the ground, gurgling curses. Caleb didn't wait. He picked up his revolver and turned toward the barn, motioning for Marlene to move. "Get them inside," he barked. Then, another voice, calm and cold, sliced through the chaos. "That's enough." The gunfire stopped. Every sound froze in place. Caleb turned. Sheriff Roy Granger stepped out from the shadows, revolver in each hand. His hat was tipped low, his coat billowing in the wind like something out of a ghost story. He fired 3 quick shots. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets kicked up dust inches from Caleb's boots. A warning. Marlene dropped to her knees, shielding the wounded. "Put it down, Caleb," Roy said. His voice held no anger, no heat, just that same coldness Caleb had heard back at the Silver Horseshoe. "You're outmanned, outgunned, and out of your damn mind if you think you're walking away from this." Caleb raised his weapon anyway. "I'm not walking away," he said. "Not without ending this." Roy smiled. "Then you best make peace with your God, boy." Behind Roy, more shadows moved, armed men, stepping into the moonlight. But one of them paused, hesitating, as if unsure of whose side they were truly on. Sheriff Roy stepped forward into the moonlight, the edge of his coat catching the wind like a black flag. His smile was thin and poisonous, a grin carved from stone and secrets. Behind him, the dying wheeze of Dog Mathers rasped across the dirt like wind dragging chains. The smell of blood lingered in the air, metallic, final. Caleb squared his shoulders, holding Roy in his sights. "Don't do anything stupid," Roy said, calm as ever, eyes steady like a poker player holding all the cards. "Funny," Caleb growled. "That's exactly what you told me the last time. Don't get involved." "You meant it, didn't you?" You knew. Roy's grin widened. "You're damn right I did." His boots scraped over gravel and broken glass as he closed the distance, stopping just a few yards from where Caleb stood, breathing hard, blood on his shirt, gun trembling in his hand. "This town belongs to me," Roy said, voice like gravel dragged through whiskey. "It always has." These people, they needed order. I gave them that. I kept the wolves out, and let in a few of my own choosing. Caleb's eyes narrowed. You're no sheriff. You're just another filthy bastard with a badge. Roy chuckled. Badges make bastards officials, son. Don't get all self-righteous on me. You think Dusty Creek would survive without the money I bring in? You think that blacksmith, that school teacher, that bartender, they'd still be alive without my say-so? Marlene stepped forward, voice shaking. You sold our people.
Roy didn't blink and got a damn fine price. You have any idea what a healthy adult goes for on the border these days? Caleb raised his revolver. Shut your mouth. Roy raised his eyebrows, amused. What? The truth sting too much? I said shut it. But Roy didn't stop. He took a step closer, fearless. You ain't got the guts, cowboy. Caleb's finger twitched. Roy's hand was already hovering near his holster. Tension strung the air tight enough to snap. Then Roy turned his head slightly, eyes sweeping over the wounded behind Caleb. We had a deal. No witnesses. Now look what you've done. He nodded once. Clean it up. From the shadows, more of Roy's men stepped into view, guns raised, expressions hard and practiced. They weren't goons like Dog Mathers. These were killers, trained, paid. Caleb's heart pounded. Marlene's hand found his. Roy's voice rang out like a death knell. Kill them all. Start with the loudmouth. As the first rifle lifted, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Then came the crack of brush breaking, twigs snapping, heavy boots rushing through the undergrowth. Suddenly, from the tree line, a second group emerged. Rough men, some with makeshift armor, some with rifles, others with old six-shooters, but all determined. They moved in quickly, spreading out in a semicircle, weapons trained on Roy's men. One of them, a tall man with a ranger badge pinned to a tattered vest, shouted, "Drop your weapons! You're surrounded!" Roy froze. His men hesitated, unsure. Caleb's breath caught in his chest. The tide had turned. But the storm hadn't passed yet. Not by a long shot. The cold air bit through Caleb's shirt as he stumbled over a jagged stone, his arms locked under the armpits of an older man whose legs barely moved. Behind him, gunfire shattered the silence of the night. Marlene was just ahead, clutching a little girl whose ankles still bore red marks from rope burns. They were barely keeping pace. The girl whimpered with every step. But Marlene kept whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're okay." A bullet whistled past Caleb's ear, close enough to hear it split the air. He didn't stop. The group of survivors, 6 in total, moved through the narrow gorge like wounded deer, hemmed in by sharp cliffs and uneven terrain. Loose rocks shifted underfoot. One wrong step could mean a twisted ankle, or worse. And Roy's men were gaining. "They're closing in," Marlene shouted, voice strained. "I know," Caleb grunted. "Keep moving." Moonlight slashed through the trees above, casting jagged shadows over the canyon path. The cliffs on either side were steep, nearly vertical in places, giving no room for escape, a perfect place for an ambush. Caleb hated it. Suddenly he spotted a large flat rock overhanging the path, barely held in place by a crumbling outcrop. He let go of the older man and barked at Marlene. "Cover them," she nodded, crouched low with the girl behind a boulder. Caleb scrambled up the side of the cliff, fingers scraping over stone. His boots slipped once, then again, before he reached the outcrop. He found a loose rock the size of a skull, gritted his teeth, and slammed it against the weakened base. Once, twice, 3 times. Crack! The overhang trembled. Another strike, and the whole slab broke loose with a deafening rumble, crashing down into the gorge behind them. Dust and broken stone flew everywhere. Silence followed. Then coughing. Then cheers.
That should slow 'em down, Caleb muttered. But the celebration was short-lived. Marlene screamed. Caleb whirled. One of Roy's men had slipped past the rock slide somehow. He was tall, fast, and brutal. He grabbed Marlene from behind and pressed a long hunting knife against her throat. "Drop it," the man hissed, eyes flicking to Caleb's revolver, "or I slice her clean." Caleb froze, finger on the trigger. The little girl screamed and backed away, tripping over her own feet. Marlene didn't move. Her chest rose and fell in sharp jerks, but her eyes never left Caleb's. She didn't cry, didn't plead. She just stared, trusting him. The gorge went deathly quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Caleb took a slow step forward, gun steady, aimed straight at the man's face. "Let her go." "Don't be stupid," the man snapped. "You pull that trigger, I open her throat." "Maybe," Caleb said, calm now. "But I only need half a second." He glanced down, measured the space between them. 10 feet, maybe 12. The man adjusted his grip slightly. Marlene winced. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You really think Roy's gonna pay you enough to die out here in the dark, holding a woman hostage?" The man hesitated. "You kill her," Caleb added. "I promise you, before you even take a breath, I'll bury a bullet in your eye." Stillness. Even the little girl was silent now. The man's breathing turned ragged. Caleb didn't blink. Then, finally, the knife lowered half an inch. It was all Caleb needed. Boom! The gunshot echoed through the gorge like thunder. The man dropped. Blood sprayed across the rocks. Marlene fell backward, gasping. Caleb rushed forward, caught her before she hit the ground. "You okay?" he whispered, voice shaking. She nodded against his chest. "Yeah, you?" "No," he said, "but I will be." They looked at each other. For a moment, the world faded, the cliffs, the cold, the bodies. It was just the two of them, hearts racing, hands shaking, still alive, but not safe, not yet. Far behind them, the echo of more footsteps bounced off the canyon walls. The hunt wasn't over, not even close. The wind howled outside the mouth of the cave, slicing through the gorge like a ghost with unfinished business. Inside, it was cold, biting, silent but for the quiet breath of the people huddled together for warmth. The cave was shallow, carved into the rock by time and rain, barely big enough to fit them all. Caleb sat near the entrance, his back against stone, eyes scanning the black ridgeline above. The moon hid behind clouds. His revolver rested across his lap. He hadn't slept. Behind him, Marlene held the little girl close, her arms wrapped tight around the child's frail frame. She was humming softly, some old lullaby from childhood, broken and weary, like the woman herself. "Is she sleeping?" Caleb asked without turning. Marlene nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Finally." The others, 4 survivors in total, were spread out behind them, 2 curled in the shadows, 1 sitting up, arms wrapped around his knees. Their faces were drawn, sunken, their eyes hollow from fear and starvation. Caleb reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out the last piece of dried biscuit they had. He broke it into uneven chunks. "Here," he said, handing 1 to each person. "It ain't much, but it's something." No one spoke. They accepted the food like sacred offerings, eating slowly, carefully, as though chewing too fast might wake up the nightmare again. "I've heard it said," Marlene murmured, "if you make it to morning, you've got a chance." Caleb chuckled low in his throat. "Then we just need to survive the night." Outside, the wind carried something else now, a sound that didn't belong. Hoofbeats, faint but steady, distant but drawing closer. Caleb went still, head tilting. He heard it too clearly to pretend otherwise. "They're looking for us," he said. One of the men stirred. "We can't fight them. Not like this." "We don't have to," Caleb replied. "We just have to hold on." But even he didn't believe it fully. The cold gnawed at his fingers. His left leg ached from the chase. His shoulder was still raw from the earlier fight. And worst of all, they were low on everything: bullets, food, strength. He turned to Marlene. Her eyes met his. "We ain't dying in this damn hole," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "We're not." They sat in silence a moment longer. The little girl stirred, let out a soft moan in her sleep. Marlene hushed her, smoothing back her tangled hair. Then Caleb saw it. A flicker of orange against the far rock wall. A glow. Faint, but growing. Torchlight. They were near. Caleb stood, motioning for silence. He moved to the cave entrance and crouched low, eyes narrowing as the light bobbed between trees. Voices followed, not loud but sharp. Orders. He looked back at the people behind him, at the girl, at Marlene. This wasn't just another skirmish anymore. This was the end of the line. He drew his revolver slowly, every motion deliberate. The metal felt cold, heavier than before. "Get the girl behind that ledge," he said to Marlene. She moved without question, her movements sure despite her exhaustion. He checked the cylinder. 3 bullets left, not nearly enough. He crouched by the rocks near the entrance, gun in hand, and whispered over his shoulder, "If they find us, we fight. No more running." Marlene's voice came back steady. "Then we fight." The wind carried more voices now, closer. Caleb took a deep breath, his finger resting on the trigger. The firelight flickered across the rocks outside, casting long shadows into the cave. And the long night began. The first gunshot split the morning silence like a scream. It came just as the rim of the sun crept over the distant hills, spilling red-gold light across the mouth of the cave. Dust and cold clung to the earth, but now it mingled with the thick, acrid scent of gunpowder. Caleb dove behind a rock as bullets peppered the cave entrance. Splinters of stone and dirt flew up around him. "Now!" he shouted. "They found us!" Marlene shoved the little girl deeper into the cave behind the curve of stone and grabbed the rifle she'd stolen 2 nights ago. Her hands trembled, but her aim was steady. She crouched behind Caleb, teeth clenched. More shots rang out. "3 coming from the left ridge," Caleb barked. Marlene turned, aimed. Bang! One of Roy's men tumbled off the slope, hitting the rocks below with a sickening thud. "Good shot," Caleb muttered, reloading. The others, what was left of the rescued, had grabbed makeshift weapons. An old man clutched a shovel. A younger boy held a broken axe handle. They stayed low, terrified, but no longer frozen. The battle had begun. Across the clearing, Sheriff Roy stood tall among the trees, barking orders like a commander on a battlefield. He wore no badge now, just a dark coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and a smug, snake-like grin. He raised his pistol and fired toward the cave. "Caleb Rowdy!" he bellowed. "You should have stayed in the fields where you belonged!" Caleb stood just enough to return fire. Boom! The shot missed, but not by much. "Come finish it, Roy!"
Caleb yelled back. Or are you just a coward in a tin star? Roy laughed. Oh, I'm coming. You can count on that. The gunfire continued, flashes of flame, thunder echoing off the rocks. Smoke coiled into the air, masking vision, choking lungs. Marlene ducked just as a bullet zipped past her head. She swung around and fired again, this time dropping another man in the brush. Her breath came in short gasps. Sweat clung to her brow despite the chill. Then came the sound of boots. Heavy, fast, getting closer. "Move!" Caleb shouted. Roy burst through the smoke, a six-shooter in one hand, a hunting knife in the other. His eyes burned with hate. Caleb fired once, missed. Roy tackled him. They hit the ground hard, rolling in the dust. Caleb's revolver skittered out of reach. Roy's knife slashed downward. Caleb barely blocked it with his forearm. Pain exploded in his elbow, but he kicked Roy in the gut, sending him stumbling back. Both scrambled to their feet. Roy struck first, knife flashing. Caleb ducked, grabbed a nearby rock, and threw it. It struck Roy in the chest. Not hard, but enough. Caleb lunged. They collided again, fists flying, knees slamming. Caleb landed a punch that snapped Roy's head to the side, but Roy grabbed him by the coat and drove the knife forward. Caleb twisted just in time. The blade grazed his ribs, tearing fabric and flesh, but missing vital organs. He grabbed Roy's wrist, twisted hard. Crack! Roy screamed, the knife dropping. Caleb didn't hesitate. He tackled Roy, pinned him, and reached for the dropped revolver. Roy punched him in the face, once, twice. Blood filled Caleb's mouth. Stars danced before his eyes. But his hand found the grip. He cocked the hammer. Roy froze. Their eyes met, just for a heartbeat. Then Caleb pulled the trigger. Boom! The shot echoed down the valley, bouncing off rock and sky. Sheriff Roy Granger went still. Blood bloomed across his chest like a crimson flower. His head lolled back, eyes still wide, mouth caught mid-curse. Caleb sat there for a long moment, heart hammering, chest heaving. Then he pushed the body aside, stood on shaky legs, and looked around. The gunfire had stopped. The smoke began to clear. One by one, Roy's remaining men dropped their weapons and ran. And just like that, the battle was over. Marlene ran to him, her face pale and streaked with dust. "You're bleeding," she said. Caleb nodded. "He cut me." She looked down at Roy's body, then back up at Caleb. "Is it over?" she asked. Caleb looked toward the rising sun, blood still dripping from his side. "I don't know," he said softly. "But we made it through the night." Sunlight spilled across Dusty Creek like a soft balm over an open wound. The morning sky, painted in strokes of gold and pale blue, looked down on a town trying to remember how to breathe again. Birdsong returned to the cottonwoods. The bakery opened early. Doors creaked open. People stepped outside, not rushing, but slowly, as if afraid the stillness might shatter. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was reverent. The square filled little by little. Mothers hugged their sons. Old men shook hands with watery eyes. Children peeked out from behind skirts and coat hems, too young to understand, yet sensing something profound had passed. Those who had been taken returned in ones and twos, hollow-cheeked but alive. No one asked for details. No one needed to. Hugs lasted longer than usual. Tears flowed without shame. Some people dropped to their knees right in the street and whispered prayers. Others just sat on porches, blinking at the sunlight as if seeing it for the first time.
By the time the church bell rang noon, Dusty Creek had started to look like itself again, though deep down, everyone knew it never truly would. Marlene reopened the Silver Horseshoe. She didn't say much, just swept the floors, dusted the bar, and lit the lanterns early. By mid-afternoon, folks trickled in. No music played, no cards shuffled, just soft conversation and the clink of glasses. Caleb walked in quietly, his hat low. His wounds were bandaged, his gait slow, but he looked alive, and more than that, resolved. Marlene saw him and smiled. Not wide, not for show, just something honest and warm. She poured a drink and slid it across the bar. "On the house," she said. "You've earned it." Caleb took it and nodded. He didn't speak, just raised the glass slightly, then downed it in one go. Someone in the corner raised their own glass in his direction, then another, then another. No cheers, just silent acknowledgement. The sheriff's office stood empty now. No one asked who would take Roy's place. No one wanted to talk about the man who'd worn that badge. He'd been buried up near the edge of town, in an unmarked grave. A small mercy, most thought. Let the dirt take him. Outside, the wind carried the scent of ash. Caleb stepped out into the late light and looked north, toward the Burnett's ranch. From town, it was just a smudge on the hillside, but the trail of smoke still rose faintly into the air. The place would burn itself out in time. He watched it for a long while, standing still as the shadows stretched behind him. Marlene joined him eventually, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Does it feel over?" she asked. "No," Caleb said, "but it feels quieter." She leaned into him. He didn't flinch. He just let her be there. Below them the town moved on, gently, cautiously, like a child taking its first steps after a fall. Someone rang the dinner bell. A few kids laughed down by the water trough. An old couple sat holding hands on the bench outside the mercantile. Life, in its quiet way, was returning. Caleb and Marlene stood in silence. No words about the past, no promises about the future. Just the now. Just this moment. The sun dipped low again, shadows stretching across the dirt road like the long arms of ghosts. But this time, there was no fear in it, just memory, just healing. Dusty Creek had faced the darkness, and though scarred, though bruised and worn thin, it had survived. And that meant something. It meant everything, because in the end, no matter how deep the night, dawn still came. And it came quietly, like forgiveness, like hope, like a second chance. Sometimes, evil doesn't wear a mask. It wears a badge. In the dust-covered streets of Dusty Creek, one cowboy dared to stand against corruption, fear, and silence. This story isn't just about bullets and betrayals. It's about the price of looking away, and the courage it takes to protect what's right. When people go missing, it's easy to say, "That's not my problem." But when silence becomes habit, darkness grows. Caleb chose to break that silence. What would you have done? True justice isn't found in the law. It's found in the hearts willing to fight for it. If this story made you think twice about courage and community, comment number 1 below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you love real stories of the Wild West, Don't forget to subscribe to True Wild West Stories. We've got more coming your way.